On a certain Sunday morning, I woke up in one of the foulest moods ever. It was one of those days that I wanted to stay hidden, buried beneath my bed covers. I'd spent most of my previous week homesick and everything had piled up. A writing deadline, cooking and storing my meals for the upcoming work week, a mound of dirty laundry, and a stack of items on my desk screamed for my attention. I also had to attend a meeting later that evening. The more I thought about all the things I had to do, the worse I began to feel. With lethargic movements, I begrudgingly began to sort through my emails. It wasn't until I snapped at my assistant for asking a simple question that I realized I had to do something before I traveled any further into my miserable maze of darkness. I knew what I had to do. Reframe it. I quickly took action by self-talking it through, reframing each thought. I don't have to work on my book. I get to work on my book. I've been given a gift to craft words into stories that have meaning. I don't have to cook my meals for the upcoming work week. I get to cook my meals. I'm able to utilize the years that I've spent in the fitness industry to prepare nutritious fuel for my body. I don't have to return my clients' phone calls. I get to. I'm appreciative of the clients I have today. I can easily remember the days that I didn't have many clients at all. By the time I'd reframed every negative thought into a more positive, realistic perspective, my mood completely changed. Within minutes, I felt happier and more energetic as I began to do my work. Reframing my thinking about my work had a profound effect on the way that I felt and on my performance. I ended up accomplishing more that day than just the things on my list. In his article, Reframing Emotions in the Workplace, Tom Stevens wrote, "While conventional wisdom says emotions get in the way of analytical thinking, modern neuroscience embraces the idea that emotions are essential for intellectual performance. Sadness decreases cortical activity, whereas happiness increases it. A study at Cornell University showed that a good mood increased both speed and accuracy of radiologists making a diagnosis." This study at Cornell confirmed what I already knew to be true from my own experience. The way that we feel has a sizable impact on our performance. When we feel better, we perform better. I think we would all agree that there's an undeniable need around us to feel better. And why not? Who doesn't want to feel better? We'll take medication to feel better. Change jobs to feel better. We'll change romantic relationships to feel better. Buy a car, buy a house. Some of us will even sign up for the latest exercise craze in the quest to feel better. And although some of the things we do may be necessary at the time and very beneficial, why so often do we find the feel better part temporary? What is often missing is the simple understanding that how we feel is directly connected to how we think. If we want to change the way we feel, we first have to change the way we think. An effective, practical, and proven way to do this is by reframing. Frequently used by mental health professionals as an emotional management tool, reframing is all about changing our perspective, the way that we see something. Reframing can greatly raise the level of professionalism in the workplace. We can reframe having to work long hours into an opportunity to cultivate self-care. Working on our time management, stress management, exercising and getting more sleep. We can reframe a tense relationship with a coworker into a space to grow and develop our communication skills. And we can reframe having to deal with an unhappy patient into a moment to be more empathetic, recognizing that that could easily be us or one of our loved ones in that place one day. We see things differently when we reframe it. Research indicates that we have thousands of thoughts per day. Some even say as many as 70,000. As Stevens pointed out in his article, these thoughts produce a chemical response which affect how we feel physically and emotionally. Because we're constantly thinking throughout the day, we're generally unaware of the impact that these thoughts are having on us. According to Bradbury and Greaves, authors of the best-selling book Emotional Intelligence 2.0, the thoughts that have the greatest impact are the thoughts where we literally talk to ourselves, or self-talk. Thoughts like, "Shut up, stupid. You don't know what you're talking about. Your supervisor doesn't like you." Or, "You've got this. Everything you've learned has prepared you for this moment. You can speak confidently to this patient. Remember, you're the expert." As we become more aware of our self-talk, we'll soon realize that we're doing it all day long. We do it while driving in the car, walking into a meeting, stepping onto the bathroom scale after a morning shower. What we have to pay most attention to is the negative self-talk, because it's the negative self-talk that throws us off track. A good rule of thumb when we're feeling defeated, not good enough, anxious, or depressed is to stop ourselves and ask ourselves the question, what is this about? When did I start feeling this way? If we're able to stop ourselves and retrace our thinking to the moment the negative thoughts began, we can often reframe the negative thoughts with a more positive, realistic perspective and change the way that we feel. Reframing is a life-changing tool. But like anything else, when we're learning something new, we have to practice it over and over and over in order to make it stick. Think better, feel better, perform better. It's a simple equation, but with a powerful impact. As we conclude our time together, I want to share with you a short story that I heard many years ago from leadership expert John Maxwell. It's a true story of a young bride from the eastern part of the United States whose husband was stationed out in California on the edge of the desert during World War II. Though this young bride had been warned of the deplorable conditions of the desert, she still decided to travel out to California to be with her husband. But when she arrived, she found that things were far worse than she had imagined. She was living in a rundown shack near an Indian village where no one spoke English. It was 115 degrees during the daytime in the shade. The winds blew constantly, blowing sand into everything, and the days were long and lonely. When she found out that her husband was going to be sent further out into the desert on maneuvers, she decided she couldn't take it anymore. She contacted her mother and said that she was coming home. A couple of days later, she received a letter from her mother, and she stood there surprised after opening the letter to find there was only one sentence on the page. This is what it said. Two men looked out from prison bars. One saw mud, the other saw stars. She felt more confused, frustrated, and discouraged than ever. What could her mother possibly mean by sending her this ridiculous letter? But as she read the words again, two men looked out from prison bars. One saw mud, the other saw stars. her perspective started to change. She could see how negative her thinking had been. She didn't want to leave her husband. Making a decision to change her thinking, she started to look for the stars. A couple of weeks later, she made a few friends with some of the Indians that lived close by. They started teaching her their language. She also learned weaving and pottery as she became more and more fascinated with their history and their culture. She started looking at the desert around her with new eyes and even requested that her mother send her books so that she could study about it. She studied all the various cacti, the yuccas, and the Joshua trees. She began collecting seashells that were left there millions of years ago when the sand of the desert was an ocean floor. Eventually, this woman became such an expert on the desert, she wrote a book about it. By simply changing her thinking, everything had changed. In life, we may not be able to control the things that happen to us, but we can control the way we perceive them. Regardless of how dark things appear at times, we always have the choice to reframe it. What choice will you make?